Every evening, King Charles III finishes his official paperwork, leaves his desk at Buckingham Palace, and walks out the front door. Instead of retreating to the private royal apartments upstairs, he takes a 5-minute walk down the mall and goes to sleep at Clarence House, a much smaller, quieter residence that he refuses to trade for the most famous address on Earth. The palace he leaves behind contains 775 rooms, a staff of over 800, and 39 acres of private gardens sitting squarely in the center of London. Yet despite representing the ultimate display of British wealth and power, the building is practically unlivable. For 2.5 centuries, it has operated as a gilded trap, one that its royal occupants actively try to escape. This map highlights a hidden geographical flaw beneath the property. The palace was built over a barren marsh fed by the Tyburn River. Rather than vanishing, the river sank. This cross-section shows moisture seeping upward, softening the clay and sinking the heavy brick foundations. The damp, rotting ground beneath the courtyard perfectly mirrors the reality above it. The building has been physically and functionally broken from the day it was built. The property didn't start out as a palace. In 1761, a young King George III bought it for £21,000 to use as a quiet, modest family retreat away from the strict protocols of court. That domestic peace ended with his son. George IV hired an architect to wrap his father's modest brick house in staggering opulence, spending nearly £700,000 to build a massive structure meant to project the absolute authority of a global empire. To afford this, the crown made a fatal compromise. In exchange for a fixed annual income called the civil list, the monarchy surrendered its hereditary revenues to Parliament. Suddenly, politicians, not the king, held the purse strings, meaning the crown could no longer fund or maintain its own home without government approval. The resulting architecture prioritized ceremony over human comfort. The new design featured a 155-foot picture gallery and vast staterooms wrapped in crimson silk and gilded plaster, but the corridors were freezing and entirely unsuited for domestic family life. The scale ruined the home. George IV created a structure so intensely inhospitable that he died without ever spending a single night inside it. When an 18-year-old Queen Victoria arrived to take up residence, she found a physical disaster zone. The chimneys drew so poorly that smoke backed into rooms. The window mechanisms were broken, and footmen carried food through such a labyrinth of corridors that it always arrived cold. This diagram illustrates the absurd bureaucratic dysfunction. If a single glass pane cracked, the Lord Chamberlain's office was responsible for the inside, while the Master of the Horse controlled the outside. Both had to formally agree before fixing it. Victoria's husband Albert managed to impose some efficiency on the household, but after he died, the Queen gave up the fight. She locked the doors, retreated to the countryside, and left the building to gather dust and mold for 4 decades. The sheer impossibility of managing the house defeated the most powerful woman on earth, leaving the palace to stand in the center of London as a hollow monument to her absence. It took a world war to force the monarchy back into the building permanently. In fact, during the Blitz, the palace was struck by 9 high-explosive bombs, destroying the royal chapel and blowing out windows across the quadrangle. Following the war, the nation was locked in strict economic austerity. Skilled labor and materials were scarce, meaning the structural damage was repaired with cheap, hasty patches. Electrical wiring was taped rather than replaced, and plumbing was awkwardly rerouted. These temporary fixes cemented the building's misery. King George VI actually began calling his home the icebox, enduring winters so cold that his staff routinely wore heavy overcoats indoors just to walk down the unheated corridors. This freezing, unyielding architecture of isolation forced his daughter, a young Elizabeth II, to actively beg Winston Churchill for permission to stay in her own home at Clarence House. Churchill refused, proving the palace had become an inescapable prison of state obligation. The illusion of the private royal residence finally collapsed in 1992, when a massive fire tore through the state apartments at Windsor Castle. The blaze caused £37 million in damage. Britain was in the middle of a severe recession, and the public fiercely rejected the idea of using taxpayer money to rebuild a royal property while schools and hospitals struggled for funding. To solve the crisis, the monarchy was forced to do something they had never done before. They opened the doors of Buckingham Palace to paying tourists, using the summer ticket sales to fund the Windsor repairs. The moment paying strangers walked through the gilded drawing rooms, the concept of the palace as an exclusive private home died completely. Its identity fractured, leaving it as an uncomfortable hybrid, a public museum, an office building, and a machine of state. Today, the consequences of 2 centuries of deferred maintenance have reached a critical threshold. To stop decaying 30-year-old wiring from triggering a catastrophic fire, the building is undergoing a desperate 10-year resurfacing program, estimated at £369 million. Whether anyone actually sleeps in the bedrooms or not, the 39 acres of gardens require constant tending, and the 800 staff require wages. The palace consumes tens of millions of pounds every single year, functioning as a permanent, politically toxic cost center. Faced with this impossible scale and an endless maze of renovations, the modern king simply commutes to work. Buckingham Palace endures. It stands not because of its comfort or beauty, but because the ceremonies of the state require a stage. It is a working machine, effectively trapping the taxpayers who must forever fund it, and the monarchs who are